So as Sam said, we'll just sort of smoothly transition to the town hall. Here we've got Matthew and Matthias. Also on the management team, we've got Robbie and John, but they're both not available right now. But any questions that you have for the Racket management group in general, then now is a great time to ask them. Like I said before, you can type them into the Google Doc, or you can put them into the Discord, and we'll notice that as well. Okay, so someone asked the question, is there any interest in making Dr. Racket, quote, more hackable? And they don't elaborate what it means for something to be more hackable, but I'm gonna guess that this is something like Emacs and Vim are very hackable.
It's really a question for Robbie, isn't it? But I'll try to jump in. A lot of the current effort in the Dr. Racket side is pulling out the pieces that Dr. Racket does so that they can be used from different places. But I think a side effect of that is also making Dr. Racket itself more extensible. It's always been hackable in the sense that you can plug in tools that just override methods of the class and do things. But that's a very large API to jump into. And I think we're gradually finding better extension points, pulling things out where they'll be documented more clearly and separately. I've touched a little bit more of this myself as I worked on the expression editor and made it use reuse indenting and things like that Dr. Racket's using. So we hope that Rhombus efforts will trigger things like that, continue to trigger things like that as we go forward. So there's certainly interest. You probably, whoever asked the question probably has something specific in mind. But in the general sense of, is there interest in making it easier to plug into Dr. Racket? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I would mention here is that Dr. Racket has gotten a lot more hackable, in particular with the introduction of Quick Script as a fundamental Dr. Racket feature. You can find quick scripts that do tons of different things. Quick scripts have access to large portions of Dr. Racket's internals, and you can write a new quick script, reload it without restarting Dr. Racket, and run it and do a lot of the kinds of customization and custom tasks that other editors also support using Quick Script. So that's a really powerful feature for hacking Dr. Racket. Even if it doesn't let you sort of change the fundamental behaviors, it can script and run those behaviors very easily.
Yeah, and to comment a little bit about what Matthew said on the idea of Dr. Racket exposing its core more, that's becoming really, really useful for the Racket language server. So I manage the repository for that, and there's another group of contributors that manage a VS Code extension, Magic Racket, that works really well. And I think that all these avenues are just in the right direction. Greg Hendershot is also doing a lot of work with Robbie on taking some of the GUI only pieces of Dr. Racket and separating those out. So I don't know, I think that we are going to see a lot of things differently there in the future. Anyone else want to say anything more about this point?
I want to add a point that Robbie made a long time ago when I brought up the same point, or similar point. That's a decade-old remark of Robbie's, but I think he still believes in that. Dr. Racket is an idea, and it is not the ideal IDE for everybody. But the ideas that are in there, some of the ideas are in there, were at the time Robbie created them were pretty novel. And his hope is that it's more like that other people will take these ideas and put them into other IDEs. So my own students, I give my students in almost all my courses freedom of choice in terms of programming language. Racket is one of the things they choose. I almost never see Dr. Racket used, but almost always VS Code. And then I often ask, like, could you mouse over, you can see where the variable flows? Because there are no arrows. That's an idea missing to this day. And that would be really cool if somebody took that and put it in the language server. So we can actually have the same kind of flow arrows or rename arrows and tail call arrows or macro arrows that we have in Dr. Racket. So I want to push this the other way around on behalf of Robbie. There's a bunch of great ideas still in this IDE. Guys, take it and put it somewhere else too. And of course, there's also Tony Garner-Jones, who years ago took some of the ideas and started building new Emacs instead of writing his dissertation. So you can do that. You can do that too.
Okay. So
it's called RMax, of course, because for Racket Max, All
right, so there's quite a few other questions that have come in. So I'll MC those. So the first one is it possible for the RacketCon selection procedure to be more transparent? I know it's meant to be informal, but clear expectation would be very nice, especially to newcomers who have not given a talk before. As a concrete example, after I was told the schedule was full for 2 weeks, Jesse Alamo was still inviting people to submit talks, which is confusing and unfortunate. At the very least, I hope there should be an announcement when the schedule is full. So this is definitely a question for me about how those things are done. So the way that I, assembled the RacketCon schedule was, I solicited talks and then gradually filled up the set of people that could speak. And I didn't do any coordination with anybody else. And so, yeah, I didn't make an announcement when the schedule was full because, I wanted to, see if there were any more things out there, if there were any, last minute additions. And, I'm sorry if it didn't feel great. I think that my personal taste is that it's hard to organize something like this in a quote fully transparent way. I think that, program committees for research conferences don't work that way and whatnot, but maybe that's me being an old fuddy-duddy about that. Do you guys have any opinion about this?
I don't know of any conference that has a transparent organization. If somebody can point us to a transparent organization, please do so.
And we're not trying to say, I assume that Matthias is not trying to say that in the sense of, people don't do this, so shut up. I think of it more.
No. I'm asking for advice.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would do it.
Yeah.
So if there's another model, I think that it would be interesting to know what it is. But honestly, I think that, an issue that I have with the idea of a transparent thing is that, some people, they say at the beginning that they want to do something and then, this life gets in the way and they have to cancel and whatnot. And the more transparent it is, I don't know, I would feel like the more embarrassing it would be to not deliver. So I think that there's value on both sides to this. But, I would say that it may seem like, I don't know, there's some special club or something to get inside of RacketCon, but it is absolutely not like that. Many people, have not done talks before who are involved in RacketCon. I mean, both last year and this year and in the past, we've had people who are, undergrad students presenting for the first time. And I am always in search of more talks rather than less when I organize it. Matthew or Sam, do you want to say anything about this? No. Okay, so the next question someone asks from YouTube, this is a YouTube user. They say they've got lots of math library extensions that they're sitting on and things that they see are missing that they wish were there. In particular, integrating with some existing linear algebra and other math libraries like OCLAC and BLAS and whatnot. And what's our opinion about integrating these into the official math library? Sam, will you answer this?
So I would say that my most important thought about this is that none of the four of us are the maintainers of the math library. So Jens Axel and Pavel are the most important people to talk about that, but I'm confident that they're excited about contributions and they've been doing a great job integrating contributions that people have to the math libraries. So I think more of that would be great.
Yeah, and when it comes to like integrating with low-level libraries, I think in general we always want that to be an optional piece, mainly because it can be hard to maintain across all the many different platforms that that Racket supports. But you know, like Sam said, if you have a cool function that is sitting on your hard drive somewhere that you think other people would like, then there should be a package for that, or there should be a way to integrate it into an existing package. The way that we all improve is by getting all of these things pulled out of private stuff and out into the world where everyone can see them.
In the specific case of libraries like BLAS, we just need to set up a package for the main platforms. And here I mean basically Windows and Mac that don't necessarily have them. And our experience has been that has worked. It's been pretty manageable. We upgrade them not too fast. They don't need to be upgraded too fast when they're things like BLAS. So I would say, yeah, that's still a workable approach, even if we have to set up some new native packages.
And there's a lot of infrastructure for how to deal with this that my guess is that is a little bit foreign to like a casual Racket contributor, but they could hook up with you, for instance, Matthew, and get walked through the process, and we could even take it over.
Yeah, absolutely. And these libraries may already be available. I don't actually know.
Okay, so the next question, are there any plans for moving away from the benevolent dictator for life governance to something like a steering council or more similar to Rust?
So I think there's two questions there. So one is, is there a particular person who's in charge of everything in Racket currently? And then the other question is, how is that group of people chosen? And I would say currently, it's definitely the case that there's a group of people who make decisions for the Racket project, sometimes referred to as Racket management or the Racket leadership team. So that's the 4 people here right now, as well as Robbie Findler and John Clements. So then sometimes it might seem like Matthew is the one who's in charge of everything, but that's just because he does all the work. But he listens to us on occasion, even about all of the great work that he does. But in seriousness, really we do meet regularly, talk about things, and it's a group effort to make decisions for the Racket project. So then the other question is, how is that set of people selected? So I think in one sense, it's very much like the Rust core team in that we, the existing core team, choose people to add to it. Most recently, John Clements, who's also the Racket release manager. And that's the same way that many other project leadership teams work, such as the Rust core team. The big difference between the Racket core team and many others is that the set of people who are in charge has stayed the same over a really long period of time. So Jay and I are the people who started working on Racket most recently of the Racket core team in I think 20 years ago now. So that's a big difference. And I think this is something we've talked about a lot, about whether having a having more people who have not been involved in Racket for the last 20 years as part of the core team would be beneficial for Racket. I think
Can I
I
jump
think
in here,
there's
Sam?
reasons to come down on both sides of that. I think rehearsing that debate here is not going to be super productive, but if you have thoughts about that, then I would strongly encourage you to talk to me or talk to other people in the Racket leadership, whether that's because you think things should change generally, things shouldn't change, whether there's particular people that you think should be more influential in Racket decision-making, whether that's yourself or other people. I'm very much interested to hear people's thoughts.
Yeah, and let me just add a little bit to that, Sam, which is that, you know, the core question is, are there plans moving away? And are we thinking about this? The answer is absolutely yes, we are thinking about this. We talk about this all the time, but we don't have anything, we don't have any concrete plan or anything to announce. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Sam, that we are constantly talking about this, but we honestly don't know the right way to do it. And
yeah, I would say that this is something we've talked about, but there are not any plans to change things currently. But this is something I continue to think about for Racket, and it's obviously an important topic for Racket leadership as it goes forward. So that's that's something we think about, but there's no current plans to change things, to add any particular new people or change how this set of people is determined at the moment.
Yeah, Matthias?
I think we can interpret the question a little bit differently and maybe give a more precise answer. The people on the leadership, in the leadership council, whatever you call this, are the people who have intellectually grown this language from the very bottom of #% kernel all the way to type Racket and racklog and data log and you name it. They have financed this thing over 25 years. They have held the group together for that long. They have projected in the education community and built a huge education clientele. And it's just a natural thing, the way academia grows groups. Over the last 10 years in particular, the language has become a product that is used way beyond the original target group. Maybe even longer, but it's definitely 10 years of that as far as I can tell. Because when we founded RacketCon, we had 2 days. One day was entirely about education, and the other day was about something technical. And then slowly, the education dropped out and it became more technical. So in the spirit of language leadership, this is a research project, and we are language researchers, and the core language grows based on the ideas that different people inject into Racket from here. So that leadership is definitely something that will remain at the forefront of research. It's not easy to integrate people who come from a very different angle at this language. On a completely different end of the spectrum, there is the social community, the community around Racket. We call this social Racket. And again, over the last 5 years, Stephen de Gabriel, for example, and other people have pushed to have meetings organized outside of this core group, have made significant contributions to the Racket repos. For example, the templates came up yesterday after Stephen and Lindsay's talk. Great idea, right? We have, the core group has asked other people to take on the leadership of repos. Sam just mentioned that we have people managing the math library. Other people have taken over plot. And there's a few other repos that just factored out. So when this grows, as this grows, what I can foresee and what I'd like to see a lot more is a social Racket council. And how much that overlaps with us, the intellectual language leadership thingy, is a question that will be decided as these two groups grow. But here's a concrete example. I'm not sure Jay should actually be the organizer of RacketCon. If we have people stepping forward, taking over that labor, taking over the process, making it transparent, I think Jay and all 6 of us would love to see that and would say, thank you, please take it on, right? So I think there's 2 ways of looking at leadership. And that second way is is wide open for anybody who wants to step forward and help us out. And then there has to be some coordination between those 2. And I'm sure that will grow out too. Other communities have figured out how to grow it. We'll figure it out too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end this question on, Matthias. And
can I not end it? But
no,
offer
go ahead.
a less precise follow-up to Matthias. I think one thing I see happening with Rhombus, and that's a kind of goal, is opening up more space on the intellectual side for people who want to contribute to the language design. And I'm seeing people step into more leadership and direction there than we have in the past, just because maybe there's a little bit more room. So that's a small thing. It may pan out, it may not, but that's a direction to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I love what you mentioned about having me not do RacketCon. I think that, in Europe, Jesse Alama is doing an amazing job setting up his Racket Fest stuff. And I think that that's going to be great going forward. Let's move on to the next question. The next question says, going forward, will Racket be marketing itself as a general purpose programming language as well as a DSL development workbench? Maybe this responsibility has been offloaded to Rhombus. My gut reaction to this question is that I don't like the question because the idea that it feels like it's saying as opposed to a DSL workbench. And I would say that I've always thought of Racket as being a general purpose programming language. And the fact that it's great for making DSLs is one of the, just a great taste.
Let me say something. I think we should see the question as follows. Every language has a slogan, has an idea that drives it forward as, hey, we are a general purpose language, but we are distinct from other languages because of X. Let me take an example from the academic world. Haskell has the idea that we are lazy and we have a type system that blows people's mind. Well, it did until recently. Now, dependent types blow people's mind. But that's the idea in academia, right? Take something like Python. Python came up as ABC, as an educational language, and then became this very clean code, one way to do it, and it's everything looks elegant. It's pseudocode on Rails or whatever it's called exactly. Java was an explicit attempt to take over as an industrial language, not as an academic that grew out. And so Java as an industrial language came out. Nothing that isn't at least 10 years old goes into the design, but it has to be reasonably safe on the type level and memory safe. And let's see how far we get with that, right? So every language comes with a philosophy. And almost all these languages are general purpose languages. And in this spirit, Racket was a general purpose language, but because of what we wanted to do with it, we needed the tools to build other languages quickly inside that language. So our differential point, our difference from everybody else is we emphasize building languages within the language. And Rhombus is an amazing example because now we're moving away, just like, actually we have done this before. Look at Jay's data log. We're moving away from ugly, from pretty syntax and go to ugly syntax. And it'll be just great, because the tools are ready. And Matthew fills the gap where the tools are not ready. So there's no contradiction. It is just our separate, our leading slogan. What you could ask, and this is a different question that may have come up when I couldn't watch the Gather Town thingy, platforms. Real general purpose languages run on every damn platform, including the web, including the phones and embedded devices and cockroach devices and whatever they're called. We don't quite run there yet, but we'd love to see people come in, join our group, and port them. So we're working as a subgroup, like Sam is leading a subgroup that is looking at Racket script, making a language like Racket on the web, and maybe even going to WebAssembly. So that's a really cool question in the general purpose direction, but don't oppose those things. They're just the same.
The next question says, there are lots of issues on the GitHubs, on the GitHub repositories that are like erroneously posted, where basically Racket and Racket Dr. Racket become kind of like the dumping ground for everything, even though it belongs in another repository. Do we perceive this as a problem? And if it is a problem, how can we remedy it? What do you think, Matthew?
So I think I'm probably the right person to answer this question. So I would say mostly, I don't think this is a problem. Particularly for people who are new to Racket, the organization of GitHub repositories is not something that I want to require before people report issues. So if all you know is that you installed Racket and there was a problem, then I want to hear about the issues that you report, and if you report that on the wrong repository, then that's not a big deal. So for some things, I think that's just the end of the story, and they can get fixed or get addressed, and then you've closed the issue and you're done. For other things where it's going to be around longer, or it makes a difference for tracking things, or there's going to be a big discussion, then it's worth moving that issue to the correct repository, and anyone who has commit access to the relevant repositories can move those between them.
And please move them.
Yeah, and if there's something in particular that you want moved, then feel free to ping me or anyone else on Discord or on Slack, and say this seems to be on the wrong repository and it's easy to move. But in terms of initial reporting, I don't think there's a problem with things all going in the same bucket.
The next question is, are there any plans to eventually sunset BC to reduce the maintenance / new feature burden? Follow-up, any thoughts on improving multi-core places and whatnot? Does CS change anything? Matthew?
I spend most of my time on an ARM64 machine, so BC is already not useful to me. So it's half sunset as far as I'm concerned. I think there'll be some natural point where something becomes too hard and we just want to add it to BC, and it'll just be in CS. And there'll be eventually another natural point. So I don't see setting a specific sunset date in the near future, but I think that'll happen on the scale of a decade or so. Just a wild guess.
Yeah. Great. So let's end the live stream part, and we'll go back to the hallway track. Thanks for tuning in.